Hey there! So on March 16th of 2018, I shared a workshop at Google headquarters in Columbia about personal branding, and a lot of you were interested in hearing more about it and actually getting the same type of material in English. Well, creating the entire workshop in English from scratch turned out to be much easier and actually much better for you than just adding subtitles. So that's what I set out to do, and here's the video. I hope you all enjoy it, and let's get started. Thanks for joining this personal branding session. If at the end of the workshop you have any questions or would like to know more about the topic of branding, meaning, storytelling, symbols, strategy, please do visit laurabusche.com/blog. Let's get started. I wanted to share a little bit about who I am and what's drawn me to the topic of branding. What's my angle, what my story is. Just briefly, I wanted to share that my original background was in business. And once I started studying the topic of marketing and branding in that undergraduate degree, I noticed that there was a general misunderstanding around just how tangible a brand can be. When you look at balance sheets and you understand that brand is something supposedly intangible that gets included in that balance sheet, in that section, in that specific section, that's when you start realizing that there's a lot more to be done and a lot more to be understood around the power of a brand in the world of business and beyond. So I proceeded to study a master's degree in design management, hoping that I would understand the visual implications of selecting certain elements for your brand. So things like color, typography, photography, imagery in general. How do those play a role in the way your brand is perceived and in the way consumers interact with it? And then finally, after visiting all those design-driven and business-driven topics in relation to branding, I decided to go to study the real depths of the consumer behavior world through psychology. So I'm currently completing a doctoral degree in consumer psychology, where I'm hoping to learn more about the motivations and triggers behind consumption. And all through that journey, where that's brought me is to a place where I've published a few books for entrepreneurs. You may have heard of Lean Branding. It's the oldest book in this series, but the most recent title that I worked on with O'Reilly Media is called Powering Content. So while Lean Branding speaks about the general structure of a brand, Powering Content is a lot more specific, and it deals with the strategy behind communicating that brand. Enough about me. Let's talk about you. And what I'm about to share is a subsection of a workbook that I created especially for innovators and disruptive individuals that are working in the consulting space, or simply people working within larger companies that feel the need to communicate their own personal stories. It's called A Brand of One, and it's a personal branding workbook. Everything you're about to hear comes from that book, and I would highly suggest you pick it up if you feel like you're interested in this topic or would like to learn more about it. And you can find it at abrandofone.com. So today, this is what we'll be talking about. So first, we'll be exploring the different reasons why you should build a personal brand, why it's the right time to build it, and why it'll support your business and any other efforts that you're currently engaged in. And then we will go over 4 simple steps to build that brand, starting from self-discovery, going through self-knowledge, self-esteem, and finally self-promotion, which is actually the first step for a lot of people that engage in this process. But unless you do a thorough self-discovery, self-knowledge, and self-esteem phase in that order, you'll find it really hard to maintain an ongoing self-promotion strategy that makes sense and that comes from an authentic place. And you'll hear more about this in a bit, but it's truly important to discover who you are, to understand, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are. Then from that place, develop a sense of self-esteem that allows you then to promote yourself. So that's why it's so important to keep these in order. And like I said, I'll explore each of these in a few minutes. Now let's start with the general concept of branding. If you've picked up lean branding, this is familiar to you. It's a structure that divides a brand in 3 core elements. A story, which is a value creation story, where you share how it is that your brand is going to support that consumer that has a certain need, aspiration, or just desire. That part of the story is the foundation of the brand. Then you use visual symbols to drive that story home. So you select a color palette, a typography scheme, a certain type of imagery, and all of these are meant to support that storytelling effort. And then finally, you have a strategy, which is a communications and promotion strategy for that story and those symbols in a highly saturated market. And so the way this works is none of the elements on this scheme can work without the other. So you can think of a brand that has a really great visual presence, so very strong symbols, and yet isn't doing anything at all in terms of promotion or in terms of communication, and therefore that brand slowly fades away. And you have the same case with a brand that has a weak story or a story that's not fully developed. It can have the most solid communication strategy, but it isn't going anywhere because it's simply not presenting an authentic, unique story that the audience can recall when they think about it. And that leads us to the general definition of brand. That's also you can also find it in Lean Branding, in the Lean Branding book, and it's your brand is the story that your audience recalls when thinking about you. I would like to really highlight this point because what we usually think of brand, if we think of brand at all, is just the set of symbols, right? So expanding that definition of logo and figuring out all the different components that actually make up a strong brand is going to be instrumental in building a solid personal brand for yourself. Moving along, here are some reasons to build a personal brand. Why should you even consider this in the first place? So we have a sense of thought leadership. When you start building this personal brand, you will become the go-to expert in a specific set of themes and topics where people find that you have more knowledge than the rest. You will also gain a sense of direction in understanding what it is that interests you and what it is that you're good at, meaning your position in the marketplace. You'll make better decisions of where to go and perhaps most importantly, where not to go. The third reason you should build a personal brand is you are going to be effectively building an audience too. So that means a community, a support network made up of your followers and colleagues and partners that connect through the story that you're telling. The fourth reason to build a personal brand is collaboration. So you'll open the door to opportunities that people are now going to be able to spot because you've shared that story. So relationships emerge from common themes and common interests. But unless people know what those are for you, they won't know whether they can reach out to shape a partnership or to shape a collaboration. So that's why building a personal brand can open those doors. Fifth reason, premium pricing. It's a topic that we deal with a lot in marketing. And for you, what it means is that over time, in building a strong sense of leadership and gaining lots of professional experience, gaining the trust of your followers and your clients, that will enable you to charge a higher price. Essentially because your value is perceived as greater than when you were starting your career, for example, or greater than someone who hasn't shared necessarily what's been going on in their journey. And then lastly, and this list is not exhaustive by any means, but motivation. So think about the messages that you send out. When you send out a message, that is you saying, here's what I believe in, here's what I stand for. So then you actually have to fulfill that promise. And that just renews your sense of motivation in your own mission. So what you say becomes what you say to yourself. And in that respect, it's an incredibly useful tool. So these are all 6 reasons to build a personal brand. There's lots more, but I just wanted to share these with you in case you were even questioning the need to have a personal brand or completing this workshop successfully, here's why you should do that. One of the most important ideas I've found in the world of branding is that people tend to confuse location with direction, essentially. So they know where they are and they think that's where they're going. And there's a stark difference between location and direction. Location is where you are now with all your needs, all your weaknesses, all your missing pieces here and there. And then direction is where you're going. So where are you going to take this brand? Where are you going to take this business that you're building, in case it's a business? And it's really important to recognize that difference, because sticking to your location and thinking that that's your limit, that's as far as you can go, can completely trump your direction. Let's look at 4 simple steps to build this brand. I've created more material on this, which I'll link right here. But here are 4 sequential moves that you can make in order to get to that point where you feel comfortable self-promoting. So you start out with self-discovery, asking the larger question of who you are, and I'll show you what that looks like in a bit. You proceed with self-knowledge. So what are you good at? What are you not so good at? What do you need help with? Then you go along to self-esteem, and that means what makes you unique, right? Like, what makes you different? And in making you different, how does that make you a story worth telling? And how do you position that story? How do you shape that story so that those unique factors come through? And then lastly, now that you know who you are, what your strengths are, what your weaknesses are, and you've learned to love what you have and to accept what you don't, then you have solid ground for self-promotion. So then you start thinking of, how can I share this? How can I say this? So let's move along to step number 1, which is self-discovery. And the essential idea to remember here is that you can't sell what you don't love, and you can't love what you don't know. And we tend to think that we know ourselves, and there's no bigger mistake than that in life. So first of all, we never really get to know anyone else. But second, think about it. When you wake up every morning, you have this confidence that you know exactly what you need or exactly what you want or where you're headed. But how long has it been since you've actually asked that question and seen where you are with respect to desires and needs? And where that takes me is we've seen a lot of world leaders that have struggled with that. And the reason is, first of all, getting to know yourself is hard. We all know this. But when people start surrounding you and responsibilities start falling on top of your shoulders and you become recognized and you have less privacy and less silence around you, it's incredibly hard to hear yourself. It's, with time, with compromise, it just gets a lot harder. So what can you do to stay connected to that essential sense of who you are? Here's what many world leaders did. What you're looking at is a diary from US President Ronald Reagan. I bet Reagan was a really busy person, and by all means, we would have all excused a person like this for not having a diary, not keeping a diary. But that wasn't an excuse for him not to do it. And when you see a president that jots down notes of what they're feeling, how they're reacting to things, how they're thinking about thinking, which is so crucial, then you realize that we all have time to do this, and we should all do it to a certain extent. Meaning we should all try to constantly discover who we are. That's the foundation for a strong personal brand. In case you're a little blocked, I have linked to a few sample pages from the workbook, A Brand of One, at the bottom of this video. So you can just download a template for a personal brand journal page. And here are some of the things that you'll get a chance to note. So something new that you discovered about yourself, something that made you happy, something that made you feel like you were successful today, something that was difficult for you, so you struggled with it, new ideas that come to mind, or something that you just invested a lot of time in. Sometimes we don't realize all of our day is going to things that we don't value as important, but they end up draining all of our time. So it's really important to identify those so that we can optimize how we spend our time. Step 2, self-knowledge. And the central idea here is that when you know yourself, you will win all the battles that you face. It's a quote from Sun Tzu, and it rings so true when you're trying to build this platform, create this story, and share it. So let's think of an inventory, right? You might have heard of an inventory in the retail world, that dreaded day when people take stock of what's in, what's missing, what they sold, what is perhaps inconsistent in those numbers. And so what I'm inviting you to do today is to conduct a personal inventory. So ask the question, what's in stock? What do I have, and what am I missing? And most importantly, perhaps, what am I missing that I can actually work on? And what am I missing that I should work with other people to fulfill? So what should I outsource, essentially? There are areas of weakness where we know, or we should know and decide that we don't want to necessarily invest our time and resources in, because it's an area where we are much better off collaborating and partnering up to cover those weaknesses. So think about what you have and what you can acquire through collaboration, if that makes sense. I've also left a format for your personal brand inventory, asking 8 really simple questions just to guide your thoughts as you think of what you have, what you don't, and what you want to collect from the outside. That's also available in the sample PDF that I mentioned, linked below this video. So check that out. Now, last thing I'll say with regards to self-knowledge is, once you recognize what you're strong in, so not what you're going to collaborate for, not what your areas of weakness are, but your areas of strength, once you recognize those areas, you'll be able to shape a single line of thought that positions you as an expert. So here are some examples of individuals that have chosen topics and themes where they want to lead. So you have Mark Zuckerberg with connecting the planet, Oprah Winfrey with improving your life, Bill Clinton with anyone can help change the world. And there are so many great examples. And I'm sure that you can find some that actually relate to your own mission and to your own ideas of thought leadership. And you can start following those individuals and getting ideas from them. It's one of the best ways to recognize what works and how they're telling their story, with hopes of inspiring your own promotion strategy. Step 3, self-esteem. Central idea here, it's not what you are that holds you back, it's what you think you're not. So read that carefully. So you're not held back by what you're actually weak in. You are held back by what you think you're weak in. And that's right. That right there is a really controversial thought. The idea that weakness doesn't come from a lack of ability, but a lack of confidence. And there are so many ways to look at this and interpret it. But I just wanted to briefly go over a few ideas that might be sabotaging your personal brand. First, what others say or do. This is such a limiting thought. The idea that others' journeys, their experiences, their academic preparation, their dreams, hopes for the future are the same as yours, and therefore you should listen to everything they have to say and do whatever makes them comfortable. You need to shake things a little bit and grow something of a thick skin to withstand all of these comments, and always remember to ask the question, where is this coming from? What you're reading, what you're seeing, what others are saying about what you're doing. Always try to understand what the motivation is behind it. Sometimes it's competition. Sometimes it's simple frustration out of the comparison that they're doing between their life and yours. And on a few occasions, it'll actually be about collaboration. So when you spot those situations where people are actually trying to contribute, definitely pay attention. But don't allow what others say or do to create invisible limits on what you can do. Second idea sabotaging your personal brand is your idea of how it should be. If you're anything like me, you create these crystal clear goals, that are really ambitious and very vivid. You know exactly how you want things to turn out, and you know what you want to hear from people. And that's the first thought you should let go when you're building this brand, because in the real world, things are never how they should be. And the quicker you recognize that, the less it'll affect you in your journey. 3, your past failures. So it's time we let go of those moments where we haven't necessarily succeeded. It's time to let go of those frustrations, those bad memories of moments where we've lost, and understand that those were stepping stones in the new journey that we're on towards success. So, during those failures, we actually learned something or acquired tools that will allow us now to secure success much easier and to know what the right action is during that moment that used to be a failure. So turning failures into tools, I think it is the most valuable lesson you learn in this personal brand journey. Just, turning something that was apparently negative into a learning experience, leveraging that to grow your brand is probably one of the smartest things you can do with failure in general. Now, idea number 4, I'm not ready. And the sad news is we will never be ready. But once we recognize those sad news, we are ready to take advantage of the fact that because we will never be the ultimate subject area expert at anything, our lifetimes aren't really that long, then we feel comfortable knowing a little more than the rest, or a lot more than the rest, than the average person, and then trying to share that knowledge in the best way in which we can, in the best channels that are available to us. So the idea that I'm not ready is something we'll always live with, because none of the human beings on this planet are ever going to be ready. And the last idea on this list, definitely not an exhaustive list. Like I've said repeatedly, these are just ideas that I've found in my own journey and in the journey of entrepreneurs that I talk to. But the last idea on this list is that there's already something like it. And that is virtually impossible, because when you invest yourself in your work, there's so much of you in it that it's impossible to find something else in the world that's exactly like it. So as long as you're putting yourself into your product or putting yourself into your story, adding your personality, letting it shine, letting your character show through and your values, then there's never going to be already something like it. And so this idea is immediately discarded. Now, in order to help you find what those areas of self-esteem are, what those values are, what those beliefs are, I've created this template called the Personal Brand Manifesto. And the idea here is for you to fill it out. The top part is about other people, and the bottom part is just for yourself. So requests and orders and ideas that you want to consistently repeat to yourself because they help you find your center and regain the strength to continue communicating your personal brand effectively. Now, our 4th and final step is self-promotion. Like I said before, this is how many people start online, and it's not healthy to jump to step 4 before you've actually understood who you are, what your strengths are, and learned to appreciate those 2 things in order to have a genuine story to promote, and to promote it from a place of authenticity, which is another idea that I've shared throughout this presentation. So self-promotion, central idea: be who you are and say what you feel, because those who mind don't matter, and those who matter don't mind. Simple. Sometimes we feel intimidated, or we're not sure if we're ready to share this story or how people are going to receive it, but we just went over 5 ideas that sabotage your personal brand, and you definitely saw that one. It was the first on the list. So let's proceed with some self-promotion that's healthy, that connects you with your audience, and that allows you to leverage those advantages that we spoke about at the beginning of this presentation. Here's what a personal brand promotion plan looks like. There are other elements that I haven't considered here, but these are sort of the foundational components of this plan. So you have your brand story, your brand symbols, and your brand strategy. A central part of your story is going to be that manifesto that I shared. You can just fill out that template and you'll find that you have a great foundation to continue building up those symbols and that strategy. So once the manifesto is completed, move forward with symbols, a set of images that represent your brand, a logo if needed, a color palette, a typography scheme. Think about styling, how you want to present yourself, how you want to present your product if you have one. And then lastly, the strategy. So how are you going to share all of that? Are you going to have a website? Is it going to be a blog? Is it going to be a blog within a website or just a standalone blog? Social media, networking opportunities, PR. How are you going to deal with speeches and things like that? Presentations. How are you going to present your portfolio? And even stationery, so business cards, letterhead, envelopes, all that good stuff. How are you going to deal with all of those components? I've also included a one-pager that's really easy to fill out. It's about your personal brand promotion plan. So go through the individual sections, think about your positioning, about your goals, what your main topics for thought leadership are going to be. Go over what makes you unique. I know that a lot of the templates I've presented are more text-based in nature, so feel free to use, for example, your inventory instead of writing ideas down, drawing them out, and saying here. At the bottom of this worksheet, you'll find a promotion plan that summarizes which channels you're going to use to share your story, how often you're going to publish, what type of content you're going to publish, what your goal is in publishing that content, and who is the main audience that you're creating this content for. Thanks for watching. I hope those 4 steps are useful to you. I hope you put them in practice. And if you have any questions after this, just shoot me an email at laura@laurabusche.com or reach out to me on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter. It's the same everywhere, at laurabusche.